Welcome to Truth Talk Live.
All right, let's talk.
The truth is, I can't hide it, I can't hold it no more.
A daily program powered by the Truth Network,
This is kind of a great thing, and I'll tell you why.
where pop culture, current events, and theology all come together.
Speak
Your mind.
And now, here's today's Truth Talk Live host.
I love that. Pop culture and theology and current events. Well, talk about your current event. How about your reaction to the Super Bowl? Like, I'm sure many of you watched it yesterday. It was the Super Bowl after all. And I would love your reaction. And that's a live talk show. It's a live talk show, so we definitely need your input. 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. What are your thoughts about, are there ministry opportunities through the Super Bowl? Should you have an event at your church where you invite neighbors and all that to come watch it with it, Or what about maybe there was a commercial that you would like to comment? 866-348-7884. Or, maybe there was something in the halftime show. A lot of people are going, a lot of comments about the halftime show, all sorts of messages they said that were subliminal in that, and all sorts of interesting things. I would love your input on that. And then, the whole concept of it. And one of the things that really just kind of freaks me out, honestly, and I would love your thoughts on all the betting, right? And the betting apps that people are now, especially if you live in North Carolina, I imagine you're seeing it all over the country. It's just crazy, right? That people just act like this is so normal that you're supposed to get on this app and bet. And Stu was telling me this morning that there's something like $1.8 billion were bet on that game last night. Like who knows what those numbers were? But that's a really, really scary thing. And along those lines, one of the people I talked to this morning, a good friend of mine who's a wonderful Christian, it's rigged. It's clearly rigged, that this is all about the betting and, who knows, right? So what are your thoughts along those lines? Of course, to me, where's the redemptive? What's God teaching us as Christians? As you talk about the world, the world and the Super Bowl kind of go together. It's like a big show. And so how do we fit into that equation? I would love to know what your thoughts are. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. And then Stu sent me this soundbite that he got on Instagram. It's extremely controversial, but this young lady was doing what we're talking about here. At least we're hearing her opinion about why the people watch the Super Bowl more than church. And so, Grayson, you got that going for us.
But why can't we get as excited for church as we do for the Super Bowl? Well, to be fair, if the Super Bowl happened every Wednesday and Sunday and that I couldn't bring any of my gay friends and I had to cover up my shoulders so that men around me wouldn't stumble into sin, and instead of a really awesome halftime show performance by a famous celebrity, it was just McKenna Lee Grace singing some Hillsong song again, or the 20th Bridge of Ocean slightly off key. And on top of all of that, I had to give 10% of my income to the Super Bowl every time I got paid. And if I stopped going to the Super Bowl, then I was told Satan was probably distracting me and I would eventually go to hell forever because I need to keep going to the Super Bowl to be reminded how bad I am so that I don't leave the Super Bowl because the Super Bowl can save me. Then I don't think we'd be excited about the Super Bowl either.
Wow.
Why can't we get as excited for church as we do for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, play it again. It's I don't know that I want to hear it again, but nonetheless, that was her view on why people don't get as excited about church as they do about the Super Bowl, which is a horrible thing, right? Like, we go to church, obviously, to spend time with God, and hopefully when you go to church, you feel God's presence, and hopefully you have this sense of worship, and hopefully you have a sense of community and all those things. And honestly, I did go to church yesterday, and I did watch the Super Bowl, and comparatively, they weren't even close as far as the experience that I had. But obviously the reason we have this show is to talk about current events. And so, I'm thinking you've got one, a reaction to, what you probably watched last night. Many of you did. Clearly, the ratings would indicate that most of the folks listening to me probably watched the Super Bowl. And so, maybe you're like me, and you're always intrigued by the creativity that goes into the commercials, right? The ones with the eyebrows or the mustache, they're flying around. I thought it was greatly creative, right? And then there was a beautiful Christian ad, right, that was pushing a relationship with Jesus. And obviously somebody spent a whole lot of money to share their faith through that particular commercial. A story along those lines is years ago, which again, I don't want to get in the way of anybody knowing that the number to call in and share, because this is a talk show, and the idea of that is I got to have somebody to talk to. So you got to call me, 866-348-7884 is the number to call in and share. 866-348-7884. All that has to stir up something in you. And again, it's a redemptive show, so we're hoping that we're lifting Christ up in what we're discussing. So years ago, you may know I do the Christian Car Guy Show, and one of my good, amazing friends is Bob Young, who for years and years was 109 You Pull It, right? Dial 788-9122. And he would at times do Super Bowl commercials. And really cool. And he got really creative when he went to do a Super Bowl commercial, because obviously people were paying a lot for that, even in the local breaks, to do a Super Bowl commercial. But the way it was, and I think the Super Bowl was on WXII or something like that, and he told me that they gave him a deal that if he bought a Super Bowl ad, they would give him one free. And so what he wanted to do, which I thought was outstanding, was he wanted to make a Super Bowl ad for his church. And the simple concept behind his Super Bowl ad for his church was that, if you're sick is when you need a doctor, or from using the car analogy, if your car is broken, that's when you need to go to see the mechanic. He said, but if your life is broken, why do we go to all these other places? When the church is meant to be the doctor for our soul, for our spirit, for where we want to worship. And it was a beautiful ad, and he was very creative, like Bob always is, in doing that. What God did with that ad, not just in the Super Bowl, which he did, but I got to tell you the results of that story when I come back. But I also would love to have your testimony or your story or your thoughts on all the stuff. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. We'll be right back with a whole lot more.
Truth Talk Live.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today, what's your reaction to the Super Bowl? Was it a ministry opportunity or a disgrace? Or, what is it with all the betting? What does it all conjure up in your mind? We would love to hear your views. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. To finish my story real quick. So Bob Young did this Super Bowl ad, obviously spent a lot of money for it. And I thought it was so good, I posted it at my website, ChristianCarGuy.com, which, is a pretty popular website. I've done real well. God's blessed it in a lot of ways. But that particular day, the 2 days after the Super Bowl, my website went absolutely crazy. And what had happened, actually, and it's just how God uses things, and it's amazing that he blessed Bob with this ad, was there was a car magazine in Europe that had found an ad that I had really, posted weeks before on, the oldest Packard that had ever been found. And it was just a historical piece on this Packard. But when the car magazine linked my website, rather than linking that particular post, they linked my homepage. And on my homepage at that particular moment, when they linked it, was Bob's Super Bowl ad. And so Bob's Super Bowl ad all of a sudden started to get hundreds of thousands of views. I was like, what is up with this? And then I found that, you could see through the link where they all came from, this car magazine that people came to find out about a Packard. And instead they found out about why go to church. I've always loved that story. It's so amazing what God does. And it's also amazing. We got Eddie is in Madison, Connecticut. You got a comment about the Super Bowl, Eddie?
Yeah, no, I thought it was the most people confessing Christ and not being ashamed more than ever in the past. You know, you see they have montages on YouTube today of everyone speaking, Jesus is my Savior, my strength, and there's no kind of shame in it. And I think that's pretty cool.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad that you pointed that out, Eddie. You're exactly right. That somehow or another, God has made a way for people to do that unashamedly, and it in no way got any backlash other than good backlash, right?
Yeah, it's almost like the cool thing to do today. It looks like that. You know, there's no feeling of being embarrassment of mentioning your faith or in Christ. It seems like that's the first thing out of the coach's mouth, first thing out of the player's mouth. Before they even speak on themselves.
Right, and so every little kid, because I could, believe it or not, Eddie, I saw the first Super Bowl in 1965. I was 10 years old. And right. Bart Starr and, Vince Lombardi, like, they were my huge heroes.
Yes.
And so to hear that out of their mouth when I was 10 years old, like, would have had a huge impact. Like, really? As later in life, a lot of the people that were not ashamed of the gospel really had an effect on me. Like, oh, like, really? They believe in God? And had a huge effect on me. So I love it, Eddie. That's a great observation. That makes my day that you made that observation, actually.
I don't know if I could ask a question. I had a question to ask. I don't know if it's
Please do.
it now.
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
We have a Bible study, me and great friends of mine, Christian friends of mine, and something hit me like a ton of bricks. And I brought it to their attention, and they said, wow, I've never heard anybody being put like that. And I said to them this. I said, let's say on the news tonight, you guys went home and they said, oh, look, they found new scrolls in Israel of Jesus' sayings. Oh, so they authenticated everything. So everyone's anticipating, what does it say? What did he say? All of a sudden they read it and it says, oh, you could look at women now in lust, no problem. So everyone immediately would say, what are you, nuts? That's completely against the New Testament. We got to throw this out. We know that can't be true. Jesus said if you just look upon a woman with lust, you're committing adultery in your heart. So every Christian, I think, unanimously would say, get it out of here. It's false. It's fake. Would you agree?
I would think. Yeah, I would agree.
I would think. So then I said this to him to prove the point. I said, think about the time of Christ, and let's say you and I were raised we're Jewish, and we're raised in the Torah and studying the scriptures, and we're worshiping Yahweh as our God. And now we hear a guy, Jesus at the time, and we hear he says, he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood. Yeah. Immediately, a red flag would go off in our heads and say, wait a minute, what's this guy talking? We know there's over 16 scriptures in the Torah that say that's an abomination before the Lord, and God says anybody who has any part in that has no part in me. So what would make us say, just like the guys that the New Testament scrolls they found, oh, maybe it's true, we could lust it. Nobody would say. What would make these Jewish people say, yeah, this guy must be from God? He just talked 100% against it. So I was trying to make the point, and they were saying, wow, I don't know why to answer that. And I just said it strikes me that basically Jesus made me go against him if I was Jewish, because you just said something that God told me to don't even go near. Even though it's symbolic what you're saying, I'm not saying literal. Even though he's using it as a symbol, you wouldn't use bestiality as a symbol. You wouldn't use laying with another man as a symbol. You follow what I'm saying?
Oh, I absolutely follow what you're saying. And I think, and again, it's, my view, and you really challenged me, by the way, Eddie. I love it. And I love to be challenged.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't mean to.
No, I am. I'm thrilled. I could not be more thrilled that you challenged me. But here's what I would think, or here's what I might say in my, without a lot of prayer and study. But clearly the scriptures pointed to the fact that we would eat Jesus' blood and drink his flesh. And if to truly understand the Torah, he completes the Torah. And that would truly be the case. Right. And had those Pharisees, or whoever he was telling it to, the Torah scholars at the time, said, explain this to me. Obviously, the Holy Spirit is all over. This is Jesus, right? And so, like Nicodemus, help me understand. Help me. I don't get it. And I really think Jesus could have I know he could have, as he has to us, pointed in the scriptures why those things were actually pointing, like the blood on the lintels of the doors, right, to the Passover, which is where they actually do drink, right, the wine, and they actually do eat the matzah, which, again, would point to that kind of thing. And so that's my immediate thing is yes, he said it, and yes, it was completely offensive. But then you remember the disciples were, well, where do we go if we don't go here? Because clearly you're the guy.
Right. Yes.
So I don't know.
Yes.
Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, no, very good answer. And like I said, I don't know how I think of these crazy, but I just thought of it, and I thought of it as a Jewish perspective. If I was a young Jewish kid and I was totally raised, and as soon as I heard something that went against God, a red flag would go up. Boom. And I would say, no. So it almost and I think the New Testament also said it was hard for some of them to even understand.
Of course. Yeah, it was. So, wow, Eddie, I love your call. I love your thoughts. We got to go to a break. Great talking to you. I hope we can talk again soon. God bless you. We got more callers coming up, but we got to go to a break. But also, this is the end of the show for some of you who can always come back and listen to the rest of it on the podcast. But for everybody else, buckle up. We're going on the Super Bowl ride when we come back.
Truth Talk Live.
Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today, what's your reaction to the Super Bowl? We would love to hear what your thoughts are. A lot to talk about there. You got ministry opportunities. Obviously, some churches were holding Super Bowl events. What do you think about that? What do you think about the commercials? Did you see something there that you felt like really lifted up God, or something that you thought man, how in the world did they let that on? Or maybe it was in the halftime show. You had some thoughts about that. The whole idea of the betting, God, what can we do? Obviously pray, and I'm praying. God, this seems like I just hate that the young people, they see this as normal from, Eli Manning, et cetera, that just go, oh yeah, just go on this app, and then, and I've known too many friends in my life that became addicted to that because, of course, once you begin to lose, you got to win it back, and it's a trap. And, oh, man, I bet you've lost people or known people that fell into it, and it leads to all other traps. So, what can we do about that? It just seems crazy. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. Or like my friend Eddie that just called in, man, how awesome is it that these stars and the coaches, et cetera, are praising God. They're showing that the reason that, and I even heard, I think it was the quarterback of the Eagles that said that, God had gifted him, and clearly God had, in order to be able to play in that game, in order to have the skills to do what he did, which was amazing. Even though I was a Kansas City fan, it was still amazing. I mean, I just thought it was an awesome exhibition of a lot of things, but maybe you think it's all rigged. I don't know. I would love your thoughts. It is a talk show, and I can't talk unless you call me. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. Or we played the soundbite in the first segment, and maybe you got a reaction to this. I'm going to play it again in case you didn't get to hear it in the first segment. It's a girl on Instagram, according to Stu. He pointed that out to me, and he had some thoughts along this line. I wonder what your thoughts are when you hear this soundbite. A girl on Instagram commenting about why people get so excited about the Super Bowl and not church. You got it there, Grayson?
But why can't we get as excited for church as we do for the Super Bowl? Well, to be fair, if the Super Bowl happened every Wednesday and Sunday, and that I couldn't bring any of my gay friends, and I had to cover up my shoulders so that men around me wouldn't stumble into sin, and instead of a really awesome halftime show performance by a famous celebrity, it was just McKenna Lee Grace singing some Hillsong song again, or the 20th Bridge of Ocean slightly off key. And on top of all of that, I had to give 10% of my income to the Super Bowl every time I got paid. And if I stopped going to the Super Bowl, then I was told Satan was probably distracting me and I would eventually go to hell forever, because I need to keep going to the Super Bowl to be reminded how bad I am, so that I don't leave the Super Bowl, because the Super Bowl can save me. Then I don't think we'd be excited about the Super Bowl either.
Yeah, so
Why can't we get as excited for church as we do for the Super Bowl?
it's a loop, so it just keeps playing. But anyway, she wants to be, she wants to be as excited about church, and maybe you just want to talk about that. Like, if you're like me, I had a lot more fun at church yesterday than I had at the Super Bowl. Watching the Super Bowl that particular time. I've had other Super Bowls where I really had a lot of fun, and I have another Super Bowl story. I would much rather talk to you if you would call us at 866-348-7884. But nonetheless, it's an interesting story. I think it is. In the year 2007, because I was the Chrysler dealer in Mocksville, North Carolina, all Chrysler dealers at that time had season tickets to every Carolina Panther game. And so my son and I had, and actually many members of my family had been going to Panther games, since their inception when they originally were playing at Clemson. So we attended a whole lot of Panther games. And this was the year that I lost the dealership, which means that I was going to lose my season tickets, which was a big bummer to me. Losing the dealership was a bigger bummer, and my house and pretty much everything I owned in the process of all that went on. And I won't get into that story, but I will tell you that, interestingly, every year, they had a big sort of hoo-ha at a tent for all the Chrysler dealers, and they would give away, because the Chrysler sponsorship, whatever, came with one set of tickets to the Super Bowl. And they weren't just any tickets to the Super Bowl. They were awesome seats to the Super Bowl, actually about 4 rows up from the end zone. Okay. And so, as God would have it, even though I lost everything that year, I got these tickets to the Super Bowl, which was in Phoenix. And that particular year was the year that the Giants played the Patriots, and the Patriots were undefeated coming into that game. And so here was this chance to have the first undefeated season in history of of the NFL or something, or this many games. And it was just like, oh my goodness. And here I was, probably broker than I have ever been. I mean, I literally was throwing papers in my life at this point in time so I could get the deposit money to get the power turned on so that we could move our family into a house, because our house was being, whatever they call repossessed. It was being, they were repossessing the house. I forget the word that they used, foreclosed on, whatever. And so, but the funny thing was, when you got these tickets, you had to sign a form that said that you would never sell them. Like that. So you had to go to the Super Bowl, right? And they came with the tickets to fly to the Super Bowl. It was a whole enchilada. Like, it was unbelievable. And so that year, when I was as broke as I've ever been in my life, God took me and my son Robbie to the Super Bowl. And it was an amazing game. And you may remember in that game that the Giants beat the Patriots in the last few seconds with what they call the helmet catch, where the football kind of landed on the Giants. That play happened like 15 feet from where I was sitting. And so that particular Super Bowl was a lot of fun. I'm just saying, but I've always thought about it was a gift from God on a year that had been really tough in my life. So we got Esther is in Smithfield, North Carolina. Esther, you're on Truth Talk Live. So grateful for your call.
Yes. Yeah. So it's good to be here. Thank you so much for allowing me to call in. I did enjoy the Super Bowl. I did. I mean, my team didn't make it, Dallas, but nonetheless, I enjoyed it. I was pulling for Philadelphia.
Oh.
What I really saw in the game yesterday, and I don't mean to look at it in such a negative way, but I saw that there was such a huge difference, especially when I looked at the halftime show. Such it just did not appeal to me at all. But of course, there was a time when I did not accept Jesus, when I had not accepted Jesus, where it would have. So I felt like there was nothing wrong with enjoying the game, but I just also felt like the halftime, whatever you would call it, show, just was not for me. It didn't appeal to me. Nothing. I heard a lot about it, how it was political and all those types, but I just couldn't gel with it at all. I couldn't get anything out of it. So
that's a fascinating observation, and so when you bring that up, it brought up several things to my mind, Esther, which I love your name.
Thank you.
Did you know that she was the most powerful monarch, other than Jesus, that the Jews ever had? Way more powerful than Solomon, because they were the Persia at the time that she was queen had 128 provinces. In other words, it was bigger than the Roman Empire. And so she had phenomenal influence on the world, and clearly a very godly, very, very godly woman. So that's absolutely beautiful to begin with. But so when you mentioned that, it brought to my mind about the halftime show. If you ever go to a Super Bowl, which I can't believe the Lord blessed me to go to a Super Bowl. I never ever dreamed I ever would, but I did. And when I went, I was amazed at how they handle the field with such a huge crowd and the big show that's being put on. Which you realize a regular football game usually lasts somewhere around 3 hours, but the Super Bowl lasts about 4 hours and 15 minutes because so much of it is showtime. Because they realize they have this huge audience of the whole country, and so they're going to use whatever messaging they want to get across, whatever the world does. Here's their opportunity.
Yeah.
And so when they come down for that halftime show, whatever halftime show it is at the Super Bowl, it's almost unbelievable the all that happens so quickly with the huge teams that they have to do that.
I can imagine so.
And the reason I bring that up is at the end of the Super Bowl, there's another show that's coming. And I want her to talk by, I can't remember his name, he was a defensive back for the Panthers. And he was talking about that he was in the Super Bowl, and they lost the Super Bowl by a field goal right at the end. And the whole time, he said, my whole life, I worked up for that moment. He said, but then the game was over, and they took this rope, and they cleared the field. And I do know exactly what that felt like. And, yeah, I had to get off the field. It was over. And he was talking about how our lives at some point will be like that. There's going to be a rope that takes you off the field, and either you're in Christ or you're not. We're going to be back with Esther. You're going to stay with me?
Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Truth Talk Live. Today we are talking about what is your reaction to the Super Bowl. Was it the commercials? Was it the halftime show? Maybe it's the whole concept, or maybe something within the game. So we got Esther is in Smithfield, North Carolina. I'm so honored that you called in, Esther.
I'm glad that you were able to take my call.
I am too. Well, we love your call since you're listening and you're sitting there thinking, should I call? Yes, you should. 866-348-7884. It'll be fun, I promise. So I remembered who it was. It was Mike Minner, if I'm not mistaken, who was a safety. And what he described, I'll never forget, because I just thought it was such a powerful illustration. He goes, here you've played your whole life, and your dream was to, win the Super Bowl. And everything was just your whole life. You went to college. You can imagine what one of those players goes through in order to get to the Super Bowl, especially if you're a Carolina Panther, a little different than the Steelers or some other franchise that goes a lot, So, here he is, and he said, and we kept thinking we were going to win, and then you look up at the scoreboard, and it says you lost. And here comes this rope, right? And it is pulling you off the field.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter that a minute ago you were a contender for the Super Bowl. You now have lost the Super Bowl, and you're just like anybody else.
That's true.
And unfortunately,
very true.
And the way he went on to describe that is someday your life will be over. You look up at the scoreboard, and You can't change the scoreboard at that point in time. It is what it is. And are you going to get pulled off the field? Or, it's such a huge opposite situation to where you get to go spend eternity with Jesus and love and joy and peace and patience versus, oh my goodness, a place where there is no love, a place where there is no joy. And I always thought, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, wow. That's very thought-provoking. I love that.
Yeah, he was a great speaker and obviously a great football player. So how about the commercials for you, Esther? What did you think about those?
The commercials were they did what they were meant to do. They pushed the product, they entertained people, they got a few laughs. So yeah, they did that. Indeed, they did that. I would never ever try to come across as holier than thou. There was just a lot of them that did not appeal to me. Of course, it's the beer commercials, and then those things, they just didn't appeal to me.
Right. Like the betting commercials didn't. It just hit me.
The betting commercials were just ridiculous. It is amazing how that has just taken over everything. And I can remember when I used to love the commercials that showed the horses, the clients.
Oh yeah, right.
But it was just because I loved the horses. They were
beautiful. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know.
And then, they're a team too, which is just, very spiritual.
Yes.
And
yes.
It's really cool to see the beauty of what all that is. And, but yet, here Satan is like, he's got this fishing pole. He's going to throw out all the bait he possibly can since he has such an audience that he has.
Certainly.
But I love the fact, so you are a Dallas fan.
Yes, 100%.
My wife is from the Dallas area, and so guess what she is?
I love it. Also quickly, and I know I'm not the only caller, I want to quickly comment on the young lady, the statements that you were playing. Right.
Yeah, that was.
So I don't know about anybody else, but that morning in our worship service, in the entire church service, I was just as excited. I was more excited. I enjoyed it more. And whenever I watched the football game, it was what it was. It was a game. It was just something I sat back and relaxed. It wasn't the excitement that it was when I attended our morning service. And so
I'm with
to me,
you.
there's no comparison.
I'm with you. And the beauty of it is I can go do it again next Sunday, but actually I can do it in the morning. Or I can do it tonight on my way home.
Yes.
But I'm with you. And so it's a shame, but she's pointing out things that obviously she's trying to make whatever issue. But
yeah,
I love the fact that I know in my heart of hearts that I did go to church Sunday morning, and I absolutely had more fun. However, I will say this about, we have a group of people that we enjoy the Super Bowl with every year, and the fellowship that we have, right, is and they're godly folks, and so we have godly discussions along the way, and in this case, they happen to be Philadelphia fans, and I was a Chiefs fan. So they took great enjoyment of pointing out to me what was going on. But if it wasn't a little of that just adds to the fun of the thing, right? It's like, okay. And I'm not, I'm with you. I don't like the idea of holier than. I'm really, really glad to, it's okay to enjoy something that these guys are out there. They've worked their whole life for it, right?
Yeah.
And they continue to do that with excellence, and then they glorify God in the end. I mean, what's wrong with that?
I love it. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. I appreciate your call so much. It's just really, really, really delightful, and so glad that you are worshiping God Sunday mornings with me, wherever we may be. Thank you, Esther. God bless you. You have a great week. So, we got a few minutes left, and I'm shocked that more people, aren't you shocked, Grayson, that more people have not called in on this particular topic? I would have thought 866, you got a minute or two, 866-348-7884, 866-348-7884. And I was sitting there thinking, I may have misspoke when I was talking about the first Super Bowl that I saw. I don't know if I said Bart Starr was the actual quarterback of the Green Bay Packers that year. I might have said it was Roger Staubach, because I've always loved Roger Staubach in the Super Bowl as well, which he was in some of those early ones. But it was Bart Starr and Vince Lombardi. And, you know, maybe you have a favorite Super Bowl. Of course, you know, for me, my favorite Super Bowl will always be the one that I went to, that I got to see firsthand. And, you know, if you go to one, if you think there's a show on the TV, like, the show begins way early on in the day, and you can't park. It was in Phoenix, and we had to park some 4 or 5 miles away. And we got there several hours early because we didn't have anything else to do in Phoenix. So we probably got there at 10 in the morning. And we still parked 4 to 5 miles away, and they had it all routed, you know. And I was just worried as far as away as we had to park if we could ever find our way to the stadium. But we did, and when you get there, oh my goodness, is there stuff going on everywhere? There are, you know, all kinds of shows, all kinds of stuff that young people are playing football, and everywhere you look, I mean, it's a show, and like a giant, you know, Disney World or whatever you want to call it. If you're into football, believe me, you will see all those kind of things if you attend a Super Bowl. You get to see, you know, what the world has to offer, so to speak. And I love that the world is offering all that, as long as it's not hurting people, et cetera, et cetera. However, can you imagine the real Super Bowl? And yes, we get a taste of it every Sunday morning, and hopefully you got a taste of it in your devotions this morning, and you're going to get a taste of it in your prayer time next time you do, and we get those tastes. But to think of, like, man, Jesus is coming back, and it's going to be like, oh my goodness, and everybody, every knee will bow, and right, and every tongue confess. And it's like the ultimate Super Bowl, and it's really it's a beautiful thing for you to ponder that, wow, we all get to go to the Super Bowl. You just want to be on the right side, you know, of the thing when you get there. Like, you know, you don't want to be like Mike Minter talking about. You don't want to be on that side where the rope is pulling you off the field, man. You want to be on Jesus' side, and it's so simple, right? The gospel is so simple. It's Jesus is calling you, and he wants to have, and all you have to do is confess, right, that Jesus is the Lord, and he did die for my sins, and his blood really does have the power to cleanse me from that. And if I declare that he is Lord and follow him in his word, which is just precious, 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 that you can continue to find out more and more and more and more about him, and just pray along these lines that, Lord, I agree, I know, and I confess that you're Lord, Lord, save me. And you believe with your mouth, and guess what? You will be, and you confess with your, if you believe in your heart, confess with your mouth, you will be saved. It's that simple, and it is a prayer, and it's a prayer that begins a conversational intimacy, because his sheep hear his voice. When you think about it, you've probably heard the enemy's voice a lot in your life. He's probably telling you, go bet something or take advantage of some of those other commercials, right? Because he was throwing all that bait out there. I assure you he was. But the Savior's voice, his sheep know it. And once you accept him as like just I described, then you have the opportunity, the beautiful, amazing opportunity to enter into that conversational intimacy, to begin your Super Bowl experience, right? Every moment of your life, that you can continue to call on his name and continue to seek his face and see, right, the ultimate Super Bowl. So I love the idea of it all, and I am so grateful for my calls today. We're hoping that you will have a great, amazing time in the Lord this evening, more fun than a Super Bowl. And then, right, we'll be back tomorrow at 4 with a whole lot more Truth Talk Live. Thanks so much for listening. God bless.
Truth Talk.